welcome to Feedback for the week of March 13th, 2012. Today we've got a big show. We're going to be talking about Medal of Honor, Warfighter, Combat Puncher, Battle Kicker, SimCity, Mass Effect 3 DLC, and more. Because, I mean, Medal of Honor Warfighter is a little redundant, I think. But anyway, I don't name games. I just, judge them constantly in front of others. Joining me today, Jake, Nicole, and Rob. Thank you guys so much for being here. Going to kick things off with a new segment this week, and if people respond to it well, then we'll probably do it next week. And if you hate it, we'll probably still do it next week because we kind of agreed that we're going to do this moving forward. So, the segment is this: 10 words or less. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Today's topic, favorite video game bromance. Full disclosure, we just learned what the topic was about 2 minutes ago. So
I did for a while, to be fair.
Nicole front-loaded her answer to seem more intelligent than us. I will start off.
Go for it.
Assuming they're dudes, Toe Jam and Earl.
Nice.
Is my answer.
Going
Right
back.
there.
Old school.
That's 8
I
right
like
there. Rob, what about you?
Mario and Bowser. There is no princess.
Ooh!
That's like haiku. That's not even...
Wow! I like that. I like that. What about you, Nicole?
I have
Does that count? Oh, okay.
Here we go.
You were the one that knew about
Right.
this.
Fight
story.
Through the Pain,
Is a word.
Cole and Baird. Yeah.
All right.
It makes a lot of sense.
Cliff's gonna appreciate the fact that there is emotion in that game. And what about you, Jake?
I guess that's one. Wheatley.
Whoa.
That's it. I only need one.
Because he's got a bunch of different personalities in his
See?
head, and he's in love with
Oh,
I
he's
see
a
what you did there.
bromance within
I
himself.
like that. So
Sick.
meta.
complicated.
So meta.
There you go.
That's actually fairly successful. I think we
I
were
know.
right
We're all
last
done.
week.
All right.
Good job. Good
Now that the brain's all working, let's jump right into GDC.
Wait, we
Rob,
gotta do more?
And now we have to actually talk more. Rob and Jake and I were at GDC last week. There was a ton of things to talk about, but I think the things we're kind of trying to focus on is right now are the Medal of Honor Warfighter, which I brought up in the beginning, and then SimCity 5, one of which we expected to hear about. SimCity, not that we didn't expect to hear about it, but we certainly heard more than I think people expected. Now, simulation games are huge already, and the fact that this had the kind of presence it had, considering kind of the oversaturation, I think, of simulation games in the market, is a big deal. So Jake, why don't you take this? We'll start off with Medal of Honor Warfighter.
Sure. So yeah, they basically EA unveiled Medal of Honor Warfighter, the new installment. It's the continuation of the remake or the reboot from 2010. And yeah, so this time, they're really pushing their big kind of thing for the series, because they have Battlefield also, is this idea of the hammer versus the scalpel. That's like the big kind of push for these things. Basically, the hammer being the big all-out worldwide campaign of Battlefield, and then the scalpel for Medal of Honor, which is the more focused personal story of these tier 1 operatives. Kind of a loud scalpel.
I didn't show much scalpel. Showed a lot of giant swords. Maybe, but not really a scalpel.
Big explosive of swords, but yeah. So maybe it wasn't the best demo for that. But the kind of idea is that it's a much more personal, much more emotional kind of story. It's written by the tier 1 operatives. These guys that are in the field have written the script. They kind of bring in these stories that while you'll see them in the game, they're not exactly what happened. It's more of a, this is sort of what happened, and then what if we went this way instead of this way kind of thing. So you're getting these real world contexts for everything in the game. All the events are based on actual missions or scenarios or news items and stuff. So
They mentioned rescuing hostages in the Philippines and eliminating pirate threats in Somalia, and I don't know, I heard about 2 of those this week. So
Yeah.
they are
There
definitely
you
trying
go.
to stay current.
Ripped from the headlines, I think they like to call that.
Yeah, and it is, they did say that most of the stories are going to be heavily influenced by what we've already seen in the news. However, I think, and clear it up if I'm wrong here, but I believe what they did say was that it's all tied into a larger kind of overlying terrorist plot, which I believe is going to be completely fictionalized, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
they decided they're not
Unless
just going
they
to
know
blame
something.
Bin Laden,
Right.
No, he was really, all this, which is pretty interesting, I think.
Yeah.
Right.
I like kind of the balance of the true stuff and then the fiction.
Well, it's really cool to actually see that, like, they do have people who've been out in the front lines, who actually do know what it feels like to be in these situations, to sort of like overlook and like watch after everything. Actually, one of the new guys I think they got for this one was actually was special ops, and so he goes through and like his duty is just to make sure that all the weapons are correct. Everything is the way it should feel. He's actually, I think he was actually even directing the mocap sessions. So the people move and they walk and they crawl or whatever they need to do like correctly, rather than like, well, I think I seen this in a movie. This is what it looks like.
Now, is this new for shooter games? Because I feel like most military shooters have a military advisor. Do you feel like Medal of Honor has more people on deck that have actually been there?
I think what they were really trying to tell you is that everybody has a military advisor, but like these dudes are the spookiest. They're like in the shadow. I mean, part of the demo was that at some point they go, yeah, just so you know, we have a couple tier 1 operators here today, and they're currently in the crowd with you. And by nature, we are like video game nerds are kind of like we're a little scared anyway. But I mean, it was this moment where you're like, if they would have just said, we've got a couple of the the guys from the Army here today, be like, oh, that's cool. But when you talk about these guys at this level, it's like,
yeah. And I think they had I think they said on the original one they had like 12 or so guys. This one they have like over 24 like operatives from like around the world and stuff to help out. So that's that's the big thing.
And I think one of the coolest things for me, and I had a chance to speak to the EP whose name is really eluding me right now, which sucks but it's airing on XPlay at some point, so you can actually see the guy's name, Chiron. But what he said was that they're using the FIFA model in this game in regards to multiplayer, which is not something you expect to hear. But what they're doing,
get that.
Well, they're going to have different tier 1 teams from different nations. Like his thing was like, if you're a kid growing up in Poland, you don't necessarily your dream is to become an Army Ranger. Your dream is to become the GROM, part of the GROM. So they're going to they want to really play on that sense of national pride in multiplayer by using like 12 or 13 or 14 different countries.
Exactly, where you're actually, you can actually play as a part of a team that is part of your country, or at least closer to you.
Can you choose one that's not your country?
Yes.
Yeah. It's just that sense of like building that national pride kind of thing. Like you're going and represent the home team.
I get
and
it
stuff.
now. I get the FIFA now.
Yeah.
So
And in single player, the demo they did show you had 2 American operators working with 2
it was like in the
guys
Philippines.
from the Philippines, I believe, two of their operators as well. So I kind of like what they're doing here. But as Jake said, they didn't really show us anything different. They wanted to make sure there was a significant contrast between Battlefield and Medal of Honor.
Oh, completely.
And they showed us a giant Battlefield demo. But I think, from what I understand, the story, I think, is what they're really talking about.
Because it is the same engine. It's still Frostbite 2.0.
Right.
So
Right.
So,
I'm definitely curious how different it's going to look.
Yeah. And then quickly, before we move on to SimCity, just you guys, quickly, one sentence, what real-life event would you like to actually see in this game?
Like my bar mitzvah? What?
Great answer. Moving on to Nicole. Let's just all speculate in our brains what Rob's bar mitzvah looks like to make him reference that.
Navy SEALs were involved again. I think the SOCOM 4 did this, but I would love to see the Bin Laden raid play out.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like that.
Anything involving Somali pirates. I've been wanting to see that in a game forever.
Somali
So
pirates.
they said that, and that's in it. So I'm happy.
Do you think people are going to be disappointed to find out that pirates don't actually have eye patches and scimitars?
What?
Like, Somalian pirates didn't have parents?
But they have planks and they walk them and they.
I imagine they have like
Until you play this
chimpanzee
game,
sidekicks.
What?
Believe it until you play this game. I'm sorry, buddy.
Or
I want to see
Christian
Occupy
Lucky.
Wall Street. I just want to see how that. I just want to see how Tier 1 operators would function in that type
Wasn't that
of
the
environment.
opening Modern Warfare 3? Isn't that what that was?
I think the Patriots game, what is it, Rainbow Six Patriots, is going to deal with not necessarily Occupy Wall Street by calling them out, but it's going to deal with that idea taken to the extreme of like homegrown terrorists. So they might tackle that.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But again, Rob's bar mitzvah.
Right. Yeah, if you could possibly.
I'm not
You can make
even
that happen.
Jewish. That's the craziest
Makes it
thing.
more dangerous. All right, Jake, and SimCity 5, again, something that surprised me that people were really talking about this game, but there are some different things they're adding to the franchise.
Yeah, I mean, leading up to GT, that was the big kind of rumor that it was going to be unveiled, and they did. They had an event for it. It was kind of a bust. Didn't show much. People were upset.
Were there
I mean-
sliders?
I wasn't
Yes,
there, so
yes,
apparently
there was sliders.
So it wasn't a total
It
disappointment.
sounds like Jake wasn't invited.
Yeah, exactly. I heard it's terrible.
the event was they tried their best to sort of like make SimCity more like a global thing, like an initiative. Like EA wants to sort of like make games that are not necessarily just games, but they want to make games that have like a meaning to them. And so they bring out all these people to to talk about like. They have like the guy who one of the guys who deals with like a water charity profit. They also have someone else who did Inconvenient Truth. Like they have all these people come out and they talk about like who have played the game.
But what
That
does
was-
the guy who made Inconvenient Truth have to do with SimCity?
Wait, Al Gore was there?
Yeah, exactly. No, but the thing is, like, they're trying to connect it all. So it's when you're playing SimCity, you have to sort of think about like how your city affects the environment, how your city uses the resources around you, how your city. When you're playing it, you're not playing it just as yourself. You're playing it with other people. So there's an aspect of SimCity that they've been talking about where you can actually build with other people's cities. But also there's an aspect of SimCity where your pollution level affects the other people around you. So if
political agenda.
Exactly.
Right now, Colin.
There
There you
is
go.
a very much a political agenda that goes along with SimCity. But I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to also put out there it's not easy to be green, basically, where the resources, like it's going to be way easier to, have a coal plant because that's going to be a little bit cheaper. You're going to have the resources versus like a nuclear power plant
I
or
don't know,
wind
how
power
is
or
this
sun
making
power.
the game more interesting to people who aren't already into SimCity? Because, like, I mean,
The answer is it's not.
It's
Yeah,
not. No,
it's
no.
not.
What they're trying to
which
do.
might be why the event was kind of a bust.
But what they're trying to do, in the event, what they were trying to do is they were trying to connect SimCity to something that was a larger scale.
It was bigger than itself. I
Yeah,
get it.
exactly. Because SimCity's always been this game that's always had an eye towards the environment. It's always had an eye towards, global. Like how does your city impact everything else? How does the pollution that you have in your city impact the citizens of that city? And one of the things, they do bring up, it's like, hey, we've been playing SimCity for so long, and these ideas have sort of been like within SimCity. Now we're just going to like pull them out a little bit more.
And that really speaks, I think, directly to the fact that they now have multiplayer in the game. And
Right.
What you're doing is affecting other people that are also playing this game, which I think is a cool addition. But the one thing I really wanted to focus on here is the Glassbox engine, which is Maxis's new simulation engine. Typically when people roll out sim games, they don't talk about the engine they built for that game because for me, and I don't know anything about coding, but I feel like any simulation engine would work just fine for any simulation game. But what is this Glassbox engine, and why are they speaking so highly of it?
I think one of the things is, and this was the thing, the event was a bust, but next day they had a panel where they basically unveiled the Glassbox engine. They went through all the features, and their big thing is they kind of showed all the features and they kind of showed a little bit of code, and they were like, this should look shockingly simple to you. Like it's like you're probably saying to yourselves, wow, that looks really simple. They're like, that's the point. And so that what they're doing is they're basically building it with these very simple blocks, but from that they're able to do these really complex things. So it factors into everything from how they manage people who go from their houses to work, or like the water pumping to the houses, like all that under the hood kind of tech stuff is so streamlined that they're able to do these kinds of things. Like all of the Sims are individual people now, so
Can you
you
name
won't
them?
just see like a big, I don't know.
That's one of my concerns.
Yes.
That would be-
Man.
yes.
You might have to keep like a handwritten list of your people, but they are your people, and
Yes.
you can name them whatever.
But because then there could be like SimCity, The Sims, like
Right, you
crossing
could bring your
together.
people
Yeah.
in, and it's all
You can bring
in
your,
there. Right.
have
There's
your
millions
citizens
of
live
them.
in your city.
Yes.
I have a family in The Sims.
Well, there you go. Well, now you get to see them all, hopefully,
Oh.
individually.
Well,
Must be nice
does
to have a
the,
family.
it's a virtual family, and there's ghosts in that family. But how does? Long story.
Who did you kill?
Neighbors. But so how does this streamlining of these features affect gameplay?
I mean, like, we kind of saw some of they showed a little bit of gameplay. But it's basically, it's going to just change how it's the interface. Obviously, we didn't see the UI or anything like that. But the idea is to basically, like, I'm not a big SimCity guy. Like, I played the original probably. I'm not a big simulation guy. But seeing those parts in place, like, you can kind of get a grasp on it. And I think
Right.
that's the idea.
Well, you were talking about like how if there were certain variables for each thing that happened to come up. So if you had like two people within a house, then the house would stay the way it was. But if you had no people living in the house, then it would start to,
Get ghosts.
get ghosts.
I follow.
Of course,
They're
ghosts,
always
of course.
getting ghosts.
But then there's the whole thing about when you were talking about the factories, like if there's a factory that's far away, but it has jobs that are open, and people will actually start making a path to that factory to get to those jobs. But then if another factory opens up that's closer to the Sims, there will be a second path that actually opens up that people will start moving to, even though there's other jobs that they can go to. It's not just like they're spreading out. They're actually thinking, hey, where's the closest where's the closest place
And
that
it's
I can
basically
actually get a job?
because everything is physics based now, and there's so much stuff going on. Having those kind of clear paths and things that can change dynamically without having to rewrite the code every single time will just make the entire simulation. And in the scale of it at this time is 1,000 times bigger than anything else they've ever done. So
Did they speak to the price point at all?
not yet.
No.
My question would be: is this considering the amount of free-to-play simulation games currently on the market, is this a full?
It totally could be.
Is it a
I think it
$60
would be.
I didn't get a
It
chance to
could
see
be
it. So,
if it's-
do they have enough brand loyalty? Are there enough people that care, about SimCity?
They have my pre-order.
I think they could do a base level, like maybe buy the most basic form of the game, maybe $30, and then through add-ons and microtransactions, they could make a lot more than $60.
Yeah, I agree 100% with everything you guys say. All right, before we move on to what I think is probably the coolest thing that we had a chance to see there in the David Cage Quantic Dreams demo, Nintendo Force asks, what kind of new things would you like to see done with SimCity? Again, one sentence, Rob. What do you think you'd like to see?
More variety of monsters attacking my city.
All right, I like that.
I was gonna say dinosaurs.
I was gonna say ghosts.
Let me tell you guys what I was going to say. A chance for me to use the Rampage monsters in my SimCity.
There you
Which
go.
seems like I'm stealing from you guys'
Amazing.
idea, but what I did, you're more of the hammer and I'm the scalpel. What I did was, I found a way to fine-tune everybody's answer just now. I love that all of our answers involve destruction. The entire game is
not a more
going-
elegant system for simulation, nothing like that. No.
No, we just want to destroy it.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I love. All right, so moving on to the David Cage
David.
GDC demo. Again, this is something that I know Rob saw it separately. Jake and I had a chance to see this together, and rarely do we leave any sort of room at this point kind of speechless. But they did something with this Kara demo that I'm not going to say it's a game changer because we have yet to see it within a game
Right.
in an interactive environment. But Rob, why don't you explain kind of what the Kara demo is, and then we can talk about just how cool it was.
The Caradero, previously for Heavy Rain, David Cage showed off a technology in order to incorporate live actors within the game itself. The Caradero basically takes that 10 extra steps, where you're starting out, it's a robot, it's an assembly line, and you actually see this robot become a full human. And then you get to see that human sort of ripped apart, and
And she's aware.
and she's aware,
fully
and she's
aware.
pleading, and it's disturbing. It's emotionally disturbing as you're seeing this.
And you
So-
immediately sympathize, which is bizarre for a 2-3 minute cutscene. Like, especially for, I don't know, I see video game cutscenes all the time. To immediately connect and just wonder what the operator's going to say. And she's dysfunctional. She's a bad robot. She's broken, and that's why she's self-aware.
Because she's too human.
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Which is
I'm
terrifying.
assuming we can see this on G4TV.
Absolutely.
Yes. Great. So I would say at this moment, pause, go watch that, but keep the screen open, and then actually come back to us so we can get a page view. But watch the demo and then come back and pick up right where we are now.
Yeah.
I think some of the great things about this is, we had a chance to speak to David after the demo, and two things that he really touched upon. Number one, they made this a year ago. So he looks at this demo now, and he's kind of embarrassed because he says they've evolved the technology so much.
They're on version 3 now. This is
Yeah,
version 1.
it's ahead about 50% of the features that the current version has.
Right. And also, this was rendered in a PS3. They did not, capture this anywhere. It's like this was made in a PS3. But most importantly, he was impressed with visually what they've been able to do with the tech. But what he was most impressed about, I think, at least internally, what they're most impressed about is that they found a way to capture the face, the eyes, the voice, and the body all at the same time. And they really feel like that's what made it so effective. Not necessarily the delivery system, but the means of capturing everything. And before we get into that, I know Jake and I then had a chance to go see Assassin's Creed 3 later on. And without talking about it, because we really can't, it's amazing. And what they've done is they've used the same type of technology. And I can tell you that I assume everybody's going to use this moving forward because it is such an effective way of kind of
And it's
communicating what
cost-effective.
everybody feels.
Right.
Whereas, Avatar, they used similar technology. It cost a ton of money. This is 65 cameras, maybe more now in version 3, and it's cheaper and it looks amazing. So I definitely think that more games are going to be using.
Well, I think
this.
you've seen it more and more, obviously, and
Well,
when
you
you
see
see it, you
mocap.
notice it.
Right.
Like the reason that Uncharted and Naughty Dog get so much credit is because they've been doing this similar kind of thing with the full body capture. They don't put the faces of the actual people into the games, but it really does. It completely gets it across. Anyone who played L.A. Noire will tell you that, like, while the faces looked fantastic, the fact that they had to put it onto another body, there's a disconnect there, and you
Ellen
lose
Martech
some of that.
was way more expensive.
Right. because it was just their face.
Yeah.
Right.
But what you see in the demo, what Dave was talking about, was that you get those nuances that you'll lose. And when you watch the demo, you can see it all working together, and it's instantly noticeable.
Yeah, you can see like when the fear in her eyes. This is something that
Yeah.
stood out to me. The fear in her eyes, and I may be misremembering because I was so impressed. But she's really scared, and you can kind of see her hands twitching while she's like her hands are shaking while she's nervous. But you would never normally notice that unless it was in front of you. But
completely.
It's just
It's the
look
little-
how we're talking now. Like they
Yeah.
found a way to make this.
Her finger, like watch the demo again if you're watching
Yeah.
it again. Watch her fingers, because you rarely like see, like you never really focus on people's fingers, but like there's something about the way that her fingers are animated and the way they interact with her skin. Like it's stunning, really.
Right.
One of the interesting things too about the follow-up interview that we did is that David said that he expects everybody in the next 5 to 10 years to share technology, and what's going to separate one game from the next is the quality of the content in the game. And what that means to me is that he's totally cool. Like he's basically like, if anybody asks me how we do this, I'll invite him into the studio. I'll show him. And I think that's really cool, man. And I hope that the industry as a whole embraces that, because everybody working together to collectively evolve things makes games way cooler.
Completely.
Yeah, I think Epic would totally agree. That's sort of their model with Unreal.
Yeah.
That they want to get everybody using that. And that idea is very compelling, especially when you're talking about something creative. I mean, the content is king idea is certainly compelling in this kind of scenario. So,
Yeah.
I mean, moving forward, it will be that differentiation of, what do you bring to the table that's different?
Right.
You didn't dazzle us with the tech. It's got to have a really strong idea behind it, which will get people thinking more creatively, I would hope.
I agree, 100%. And speaking of things that people have been talking quite a bit about over the last week or so, Mass Effect 3. Nicole, you have played a lot of this game. I
Yeah.
know we've all put some time in, but I want to focus specifically on the Day 1 DLC that pissed off a lot of people, that made certain people very happy. But on the whole, why don't we just first start off with what is the Day 1 DLC from Ashes?
So From Ashes is I don't want to spoil anything, but I guess they've really
no,
I'm
hold
sorry.
on, let
I
me-
know,
Spoiler
I know.
alert,
Hold on.
everybody.
It is a
Uh-huh.
Prothean DLC pack. You have a mission where you rescue a Prothean who's been in stasis for over 50,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
He is the last survivor of the Prothean race. And when you play that DLC and you save him, you acquire him as a playable squad member. Or you're not playable, but he is your squad member. So the controversy there is... gamers don't like Day 1 DLC because no matter what's going on, they feel like something was taken out of the game
Sure.
that's complete, and they have to pay for and then pay for again. And so there's mistrust there already. And then on top of that, we have different people from BioWare, Gamble, Casey Hudson, saying things like, we would never take things out of the main story to sell you as DLC. The DLC wasn't complete when the game was completed. And so they never said no part of the DLC is on the disc, but I think that it's something that was implied and a lot of gamers took from it. Turns out a PC gamer opened some of the source files, and by changing a few letters, you could unlock Javik, who is the Prothean. So at least his complete build was on, with voice acting and animation, was on the disc. Issue there is people paid for the disc, but they had to pay to unlock content on the disc. Lots of angry
That was already on the disc.
Yeah.
And in a way, and this is, I'm playing devil's advocate here, but in a way that's kind of contradictory to what Casey said. Like, the game was complete and we had to add this, but not really, because it's on the disc.
Yeah.
So, and again, I don't know anything about coding,
Right.
but it sounds to me like this is something that could have easily been available as part of the retail version of the game.
And if you are a Mass Effect fan, having a Prothean on your team and learning about the Protheans is really vital to the experience. And so I don't really accept the argument that this is just an add-on, that it's not part of the main story, because knowing about the Protheans was the point of Mass Effect 1. It was not really the point of Mass Effect 2, but then again in Mass Effect 3, you're fighting the Reapers, and it's the Protheans who fought before you. So I definitely think that I'm on the side of I don't appreciate it. I don't appreciate Day 1 DLC. I don't appreciate buying content already on my disc. I don't. If DLC is disc locked content, then I don't support it.
Right. Jake, you've been taking notes, man. What do you think? You've been writing stuff down.
He's
There's a
actually
couple
drawing
things that
pictures of
are
penises.
that are upsetting about it. I definitely agree about the idea if it's on there and then I paid for it, whatever. But for this, it's not part of the main story. It might be just been a poor decision on their part to release it Day 1. The idea that it's like some big controversy because like part of it was on the disc and it had to unlock later. Like if you just think about the disc as a storage device, so there's some code on there and then they release the DLC. You download it, and it unlocks everything in the game. It could be just like a transfer thing. Like they don't want you to have to download that extra part. To have it on the disc would be much easier for them. Again, I don't know anything about coding. Seems to be that that's what they were talking about, especially if the guy unlocked just the character on the PC version. It doesn't have the 600 megabytes, the entire mission, all of the other stuff that
It's
goes along
not
with
It
it.
all
was
of the
a very
DLC.
short mission.
So
Really?
I mean,
Sorry.
so there you go.
right.
So maybe it's
Spoiler.
just a bad idea that it was a payable DLC. It couldn't.
No.
It
that's
was $10.
the bigger philosophy.
It was 1/6 of the price that I paid for my game.
Right.
And
What-
certainly wasn't 1/6 of the content of the game.
No, but
No.
I would have paid $10 just for the Prothean because he's a Prothean. I mean,
But like
how
you were
cool
saying,
is that?
but like you were saying, like you had the collector's edition,
did.
which
I
was
bought the collector's
which was
edition.
$10-$20 more than the actual game. You got the DLC for
but
free.
I got a robot dog.
Well, that
Well, there
pays
you
for
go.
itself right there. But also,
Is-
you paid for the DLC.
Right.
If you bought the standard edition, and then you didn't buy like the DLC is $10 on top of that, so you're paying the same thing. So it's just the
it's
DLC.
about. I mean, you got to think of the game as sort of like a whole. When you're buying the special edition, maybe that's more of your standard price, while the regular
Right.
$60 edition is now your lower cost, I guess.
Well,
Uh,
Again, it could
DLC
just be a bad model. It's I don't. But I just think there's
it's
anything
a weird-
insidious
it's
about
the fact
what
that
they
it's
did.
on the
Weird. It's a
disc.
weird model. It's a weird thing to actually have on there. But I completely agree with you, Jake. If they happen to be able to store some of the stuff on the disc, and I don't have to wait like 2 extra hours while downloading all the stuff, I'm fine. It's cool.
Yeah.
Or if you can make a game cheaper by locking some stuff away on the disc, do it.
making you cheaper, but then making you pay for it later.
If I don't,
I mean,
I
it's
don't.
gonna-
But the thing is, it's DLC. I don't have to pay for it.
No, but if you're
I
honestly though,
don't-
if you're a Mass Effect fan and you played at least the first game, you need the.
But it's
Prothean.
But they're
not-
going to buy anything anyway, so it
Yeah.
doesn't
Right.
really matter.
Well,
And I mean,
That's-
look, and the
that's
fact of the
brand
matter is, too,
disrespect.
is it's not like for $60 what they provided was an incomplete Mass
Right,
Effect
exactly.
experience,
Right.
right?
I don't
And
think-
True.
I'm of the mind, it's like Borderlands, right?
Yeah.
They could charge me, I spent however many, I spent 50, 60 extra dollars on
Oh, yeah,
all of the stuff that they,
completely.
you know, that they charged me for, and then cut to 6 months later, and the entire like Game of the Year edition was only $60 with all that DLC. But I didn't care because I'd already gotten what I needed from Borderlands, and then I made the decision to continue paying for extra things. And I think if we were talking about a game that was maybe fundamentally broken and they're charging to make the experience more complete, I'd be pissed off. But I do think day one DLC is kind of a bad model. I think, you know, you roll this out a little bit later on, but in this particular case, I think it's okay because, again, the experience, yes, if you're a huge Mass Effect fan, you want to have that extra stuff, but you don't need it to experience Shepard's journey the way that I think BioWare wanted to tell that story.
Exactly.
But could we see this, you know, in a more broken game? Absolutely. And then I'd be pissed off about it. But
Well-
in this particular instance, I'm not that
I
upset about
pulled
it.
one of the commenters who
Uh-oh.
basically said something along that line, and he says, I'm going to read the part where he disses G4.
That's okay.
That's
It
okay.
happens.
It's fine.
So they being G4 haven't peeped once about the whole Street Fighter X Tekken scandal and how 30% of the roster is disc locked content that PS Vita users who buy the same game won't have to pay for. And so what's going on with Street Fighter X Tekken is that there are 12 playable characters on the console version of the game, which is out now, that are locked until the fall when the Vita version comes out. And the Vita version, which I think is cheaper because it's a Vita game, I don't think it's $60, those gamers won't have to pay to unlock those characters. And the console gamers will, and they have to wait until fall, even though they know 30% of the roster is on the disc already. And that's something I think, especially the gaming community, thinks is really unfair.
I would agree with that. I mean, if you're going to charge for one person, then I think you have to charge the other person as well. I know in the fighting game situation, like I'm not the biggest fighting game player, but I could understand how I'd be pretty pissed off if I felt like I'd played as much as I wanted to play with these guys, and then, you know, knowing that these dudes are down the road, I'd be a little upset with it.
And then they get mad when you mod your Xbox and unlock it. And then it's like, well, don't tell me. Like, Capcom announced, but confirmed this. And it's like, if you're going to do something like this, which is a little shady, do it a little more secretive.
And not in such a large game. I mean, I like how you're like, it's
Don't-
ignorance
don't-
is bliss,
don't
man.
send
admit
it
it.
out the disc.
I mean, if you're going to
Don't-
tell people, they're going to get pissed off. And it was Adam Phoenix's comment that I read, by the way.
All right. Well, Adam, thank you for your honesty.
Yes.
And thank you for your judgment, because I feel like we judge everybody else so much. So we appreciate the
take it.
criticism
Each
as
of our
well.
own medicine.
But I do agree. The one thing that expanding on that, they also said that does it hurt brand loyalty at all? I think the sales numbers state that it doesn't. I mean, we get upset about it, and people get upset about it, but as Jake said, as Rob said, and even as you said, if you like the game, you're going to pay for
Yeah.
it.
And in Mass Effect's case, I think the ending's going to hurt brand loyalty more than the DLC.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I've tried to stay away as much as possible because I haven't had any time. But what I am getting is that the end is not what everybody wanted it to be.
Just let it go.
Maybe they
Let
offered a
it
different
go.
ending as DLC.
Yeah. Oh,
Maybe
no,
that
we're not.
That was tossed
Like the
around,
Dark,
yeah.
the Dark Tower series, Stephen King was like, "Here's the ending that you guys wanted me to write, so here it is." I read both, and I was like, "I appreciate both options, Stephen,
See,
and I will
that's,
make my own decision."
And I would love that.
Yeah.
I really would.
No, let's not.
We're
get-
not,
That's a whole
we're
nother
not
conversation.
going to talk
We're
about it
not.
now, especially
Right.
from
What?
people who haven't beaten the game.
All right, great. We'll move forward from that. All right, let's move on to the fan feedback section. Funky McGee says this: given the sheer amount of conferences, GDC, CES, TGS, E3, PAX East and West, Comic-Con San Diego, and New York, WonderCon, do you think they're starting to lose their marketing value? As someone who covers, as a network who covers all these things, I think as long as they continue to bring new things to each one of these conferences, there's no marketing value lost, because for us, we get excited about going out there and seeing new things. I think E3 and GDC and PAX East tend to get a little bit weird because they want to hold certain things back, or
with
DICE,
PAX
excuse me, and they it's not necessarily they're showing things at DICE, but they can't talk about
They know
things
what
at
they're
DICE.
gonna show,
They know what they're
yeah.
going to talk
I
about.
think it's a very like you're talking about like three very different sort of like conferences, and
Sure.
so like DICE isn't like a place you
Right.
necessarily see games. DICE
Right.
is the places where you talk to developers, and same thing with GDC. I think GDC is a great place for seeing like smaller indie games, for seeing like maybe the games that are not going to get as much love or attention as like a AAA title.
Well,
While-
or for AAA titles, it was very smart of EA to announce Medal of Honor.
Yeah, exactly.
That will be released probably a week before Call of Duty will be, so it's a huge competitor.
Sure.
So it was smart of them to choose GDC.
Right.
So let's focus maybe on just consumer conferences. Do you guys feel like the marketing value is lost? I don't think
Not
so.
E3,
I think-
but
No.
I think Gamescom definitely suffers from being right after E3, and you see a lot of the same demos, you see a lot of the same reveals as E3.
Do you
Well, I
think
think
that
that's-
part of that,
yeah.
though, is because they're focusing more on the international audience? Like, there's a
Maybe.
lot
Yeah,
of
I
guys at
think that's
Gamescom
it.
that don't get a chance to make E3,
But
and vice
we all
versa.
have the internet, so we've all probably seen it.
But
Right.
at the same time, I think a lot of companies are looking to Gamescom as a place to sort of separate itself out of E3, because E3 is the place where you do show, I mean, you bring out the big guns.
Right.
You make the big announcements. You show off the big games. And if you are not one of those big games, you need your own sort of like place to do things. And so a lot of people are starting to break off from there and starting to show in Gamescom or TGS or even PAX, where you can get a little bit more eyeballs on it.
Jake, I'm going to take it in a different direction. As someone who covers it from the internet side of things, do you think that the kind of the leaks and the kind of, I don't know, there's so much more citizen journalism out there now. Do you think that hurts the marketing value of these conferences? Because as Nicole said, the internet already exists, and a lot of the things that, I mean, they keep it close to the vest as far as E3 is concerned, but you can argue that 25% of all E3 announcements at this point will be on the internet before E3 because somebody makes a mistake and some shareholder's phone call. Do you think that hurts the marketing value of these things?
I mean, it's hard to say. It when those kinds of things get leaked, if the Assassin's Creed 3 gets leaked or something, it certainly hurts it a little bit because they're really pushing to have it shown at E3 or something like that. But those people are still going to look at it when it's shown at E3
Eyeballs
and
are
stuff.
eyeballs, I
Yeah,
guess.
exactly.
Yeah.
So that could be a different kind of argument, but I mean, people still love the big conferences and stuff.
yeah.
There's not E3. Yes, is huge, and PAX is a little bit smaller and stuff like that. So I think they have their kind of, they're not niche, but like they have their own sort of styles.
Completely.
So I think that they're fine as long as there's not like E4, E5, E6 kind of things coming up soon. I think it should be
funny.
fine.
I know,
That
dude.
that terrifies
Yeah,
me.
That's
I'm like,
E4.
what do you? I got to get back into the Adderall
As
stage
a-
of my college life.
As an aside, how many trailers we think will have dubstep in this year?
Oh, so
We're
many.
gonna have
All-
such a headache
all
at
of them
E3.
is
That said, in
All
advance,
of them.
Borderlands
Yep.
2, you won already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
that
we should
was
not do it.
absolutely
Because the
amazing.
claptrap slow dance to the
Yeah.
dubstep.
Which
is so
Come
good.
on.
All right, well, thank you guys for being here. I wish we had more time, but before we close out, speaking of E3, Rob, what are you most looking forward to see at E3 this year? We are a couple months out.
I could not be more excited about Borderlands. Borderlands. Borderlands, and Fez.
Okay, sounds good. What about you, Nicole?
Well, I'm calling it now. Now that Mass Effect is finished, BioWare's going to work on Jade Empire 2. I call it every year.
That's
I'm
not
always
a reasonable
wrong.
hope. I like that, actually.
Okay.
That's good.
Assassin's Creed 3 and Bioshock Infinite. Just can't help it.
100%, man. After that demo we saw at UB, Assassin's Creed 3 is freaking awesome. And this is coming from somebody who was kind of chilled a little bit on the Assassin's experience. This is going to bring in a whole lot of people. So as usual, we will cover all of that as it comes out. We will give it all to you guys. And as usual as well, you can catch new episodes of Feedback every week, Wednesdays at g4tv.com/feedback. Thank you for joining us.